If you feel exhausted from explaining yourself, drained from reacting, and tired of carrying other people's emotions, this is not a weakness in you. It is a sign that you have outgrown the noise. Buddhism teaches that the moment you stop reacting is the moment you reclaim your power. In 2026, the strongest people will not argue, chase, or defend themselves. They will move in silence, focus inward, and remain unbothered while the world stays loud. Stay with me, because these 12 Buddhist lessons will show you how to master yourself so deeply that nothing and no one can disturb your peace again. 1. Stop explaining yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. Buddhism gently teaches that much of our suffering does not come from what happens to us, but from how deeply we seek approval, understanding, and validation from people who are not willing to give it. When you constantly feel the need to explain yourself, your choices, your boundaries, your healing, your silence, or your growth, you slowly drain your inner peace. You repeat yourself, you justify your intentions, you clarify again and again, hoping that this time they will finally understand. But when someone is committed to misunderstanding you, no explanation will ever be enough. Their mind is already closed, and every word you offer only exhausts you further. Think of it like pouring water into a cup with no bottom. No matter how much you give, nothing stays. Your energy, your emotions, and your sincerity are lost, and you are left feeling unheard, frustrated, and emotionally tired. Buddhism does not ask you to become cold or distant, but it teaches discernment, knowing where your energy belongs and where it does not. Silence, in this case, is not weakness or fear. Silence is clarity. Silence is self-respect. Silence is you choosing peace over endless emotional labor. When you stop explaining yourself, something powerful happens inside you. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop trying to convince others that your feelings are valid, that your boundaries are reasonable, or that your growth is real. You begin to understand that your path does not require permission. Not everyone is meant to walk with you, and not everyone is meant to understand you. The Buddha taught that attachment to opinions, especially the opinions of others, creates suffering. The more you cling to being understood, the more you suffer when misunderstanding appears. Letting go does not mean you are wrong, it means you are free, free from the need to be approved, free from emotional arguments, free from repeating your story to people who only want to hear their own version of you. When you remain silent, you protect your inner balance. You conserve your energy for things that truly matter: your peace, your growth, your awareness. People will think what they want, and that is something Buddhism teaches us to accept calmly. Their thoughts are not your responsibility. Your peace does not need their agreement. Your journey does not need their validation. The moment you stop explaining yourself to those who are determined not to understand, you step into a deeper level of self-mastery. You move from reacting to choosing, from proving to being, from suffering to serenity. This is not giving up. This is growing up spiritually. 2. Focus on self-correction, not other correction. Buddhism teaches that the greatest illusion of the untrained mind is the belief that peace will come once other people change. We tell ourselves that if they behaved better, spoke differently, understood us more, or acted the way we expect, then we would finally feel calm. But this way of thinking quietly traps us in suffering because it places our inner state in the hands of forces we do not control. The Buddha made it clear that suffering grows when attention is constantly directed outward instead of inward. The moment you focus more on correcting others than understanding yourself, you lose power over your own life. When you try to fix people, you carry a heavy emotional burden. You become frustrated when they do not listen, disappointed when they do not change, and resentful when they repeat the same patterns. This exhaustion does not come from their behavior alone, but from your attachment to the idea that they should be different. Buddhism invites you to release this attachment and turn your attention inward, not as an act of selfishness, but as an act of wisdom. You begin to ask quieter, deeper questions. How am I responding? Why does this trigger me? What expectation am I holding that is causing this pain? Self-correction is where true mastery begins. Instead of reacting to the flaws of others, you work with your own mind. You notice impatience arising and you soften it. You notice anger building and you breathe through it. You notice judgment forming and you release it. This inner work is invisible to the world, but it transforms your experience of life completely. The Buddha taught that conquering yourself is greater than conquering 1,000 battles, because when the mind is disciplined, external chaos loses its power. When you focus on mastering yourself, something remarkable happens. People no longer control your emotions so easily. Their words do not shake you the way they once did. Their actions stop feeling personal. You realize that everyone is acting from their own conditioning, fears, and level of awareness. This understanding does not excuse harmful behavior, but it frees you from carrying unnecessary emotional weight. You stop trying to reshape the world and start strengthening your inner foundation. Self-respect grows naturally through self-correction. You no longer waste energy pointing out what is wrong with others. Instead, you invest that energy into becoming calmer, clearer, and more grounded. You accept that you cannot walk someone else's path for them, just as no one can walk yours. This acceptance brings peace. It allows you to move through life without resistance, without constant inner conflict, and without the need to control. Buddhism reminds us that when the mind is trained, the world feels lighter. By focusing on self-correction rather than other correction, you reclaim your power. You stop arguing with reality and start aligning with it. And in that alignment, peace becomes something you carry within you, not something you chase from others. 3. Silence is a shield for your energy. Buddhism teaches that energy is precious, and once it is spent, it cannot be recovered in the same form. Every unnecessary conversation, every argument you did not need to enter, every emotional reaction you could have avoided quietly drains your inner strength. Many people do not realize how tired they are, not because life is too hard, but because they are constantly leaking energy through words, explanations, reactions, and emotional exposure. Silence, in Buddhism, is not emptiness or withdrawal. Silence is protection. It is a conscious decision to guard your inner world from noise that does not deserve access. When you speak without awareness, you give people entry into your emotional space. They respond, they challenge, they misunderstand, they provoke, and suddenly your peace is disturbed. Silence interrupts this cycle. It creates a boundary that does not need to be announced or defended. When you choose silence, you are not suppressing yourself. You are choosing not to waste yourself. You are saying without words, "My energy is valuable, and I will not spend it carelessly." The Buddha taught mindfulness of speech for a reason. Words have power, but silence has depth. In silence, your mind slows down. You begin to notice what is actually happening instead of reacting automatically. You observe tone, intention, and behavior without becoming emotionally entangled. This awareness gives you strength. Instead of being pulled into other people's chaos, you stand firmly in your own calm. Silence allows you to respond later with clarity or not respond at all, which is often the wiser choice. Many people fear silence because they believe it makes them look weak or defeated. Buddhism turns this belief upside down. Silence is not surrender, it is mastery. It takes far more strength to remain calm than to react emotionally. It takes discipline to hold your tongue when your ego wants to speak. Each time you choose silence over reaction, you reinforce self-respect. You teach your mind that peace is more important than being heard, and clarity is more important than being right. Silence also protects you from revealing too much of yourself to people who may misuse your vulnerability. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, plans, struggles, or emotions. Buddhism teaches discernment, knowing when to speak and when to remain quiet. When you speak less, you are observed more carefully. Your presence becomes heavier, your words more meaningful, and your boundaries clearer without explanation. As you move through life, you will notice that silence changes how people interact with you. Some will respect it, some will feel uncomfortable around it. Some may try harder to provoke a reaction. This is not a sign that silence is wrong. It is a sign that your energy is no longer easily available, and that is a form of freedom. When silence becomes your shield, your peace remains intact, your mind stays clear, and your life becomes lighter. This is not withdrawal from the world. This is standing in the world without letting it drain you. 4. Let go of the need to be liked. One of the deepest sources of hidden suffering in human life is the desire to be liked, approved of, and accepted by everyone. Buddhism teaches that this desire is subtle but powerful, and if left unexamined, it quietly controls your thoughts, your words, and even your identity. When you need to be liked, you begin to shape yourself around other people's expectations. You soften your truth, silence your boundaries, and adjust your behavior so you do not disappoint, upset, or lose approval. Over time, this creates inner tension because the person you present to the world slowly moves further away from who you truly are. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering, and attachment to approval is one of the most painful forms. People's opinions are unstable. They change based on mood, benefit, jealousy, misunderstanding, and personal wounds that have nothing to do with you. When your sense of worth depends on being liked, your emotional state becomes fragile. Praise lifts you up, criticism breaks you down, and silence from others fills your mind with doubt. This constant emotional movement is exhausting, and Buddhism invites you to step off this unstable ground. Letting go of the need to be liked does not mean you become rude, cold, or careless. It means you stop living for validation. You understand that kindness does not require self-betrayal, and compassion does not mean self-erasure. A person rooted in Buddhist wisdom treats others with respect, while no longer needing their approval to feel whole. You can be polite without people-pleasing. You can be loving without being dependent. You can be present without performing. When you release this need, you begin to notice how much energy was spent monitoring reactions. You no longer constantly read faces, tones, or messages looking for signs of acceptance or rejection. Your mind becomes quieter. You act with intention instead of fear. You speak honestly or remain silent, not because it will be liked, but because it is aligned with your values. This alignment is the foundation of self-respect. Buddhism reminds us that not everyone is meant to like you, just as you are not meant to like everyone. Each person sees the world through their own conditioning, beliefs, and limitations. Some will misunderstand your silence as arrogance. Some will see your boundaries as distance. Some will dislike you simply because you remind them of something they have not faced within themselves. None of this is your responsibility. Carrying the emotional burden of how others perceive you is a form of unnecessary suffering. As you move deeper into this understanding, something important shifts. You stop shrinking to be accepted and stop expanding to impress. You become steady. You allow yourself to be seen as you are, without defending or explaining. Those who resonate will stay. Those who don't were never meant to walk beside you. Buddhism teaches that peace comes not from being surrounded by approval, but from being grounded in truth. Letting go of the need to be liked also frees you from comparison. You stop measuring your worth against other people's lives, popularity, or approval. You no longer chase attention or fear invisibility. You understand that your value is intrinsic, not assigned. This realization creates a quiet confidence that does not need to announce itself. It is felt in your posture, your calmness, and your choices. When you no longer need to be liked, your silence becomes natural, not forced. Your boundaries become firm, not defensive. Your presence becomes peaceful, not anxious. Buddhism calls this inner freedom. You are no longer reacting to the world, you are responding from clarity. You do not need applause to move forward, nor approval to remain steady. This is not isolation. This is independence of the mind. When you let go of the need to be liked, you reclaim your inner authority. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop bending your spirit for acceptance. And in that release, you discover something deeper than approval, self-respect, stability, and a peace that does not rise and fall with other people's opinions. 5. Do not attend every emotional invitation. Buddhism teaches that not every emotion that arises around you requires your participation. Much of human suffering comes not from what happens, but from the unconscious habit of reacting to everything that seeks our attention. An emotional invitation can arrive in many forms: a careless comment, a provocation, a criticism, a passive-aggressive tone, a dramatic message, or someone projecting their frustration onto you. The untrained mind feels compelled to respond immediately, to defend, to correct, or to explain. But the disciplined mind pauses, observes, and chooses wisely. This pause is where freedom begins. When you attend every emotional invitation, you allow others to dictate your inner state. A single remark can ruin your mood. A small disagreement can occupy your thoughts for hours or days. Buddhism teaches that this is not power, this is captivity. You become a prisoner of external triggers. The Buddha emphasized mindfulness so that we could see emotions arise without being consumed by them. An emotion is not a command. It is simply a momentary experience. You are not required to accept every invitation that knocks on your emotional door. Many people confuse reaction with strength. They believe that responding quickly, defending themselves loudly, or expressing every feeling proves self-respect. Buddhism teaches the opposite. True self-respect is restraint. It is knowing that your peace is more valuable than momentary emotional release. When you choose not to engage, you are not avoiding the issue. You are choosing clarity over chaos. Silence and non-reaction do not mean suppression. They mean conscious choice. When someone tries to pull you into drama, they are often seeking validation, control, or emotional discharge. If you step in automatically, you become part of their inner storm. Buddhism teaches compassion, but compassion does not require self-sacrifice. You can understand someone's pain without carrying it. You can acknowledge their emotion without absorbing it. You can walk away without guilt. Not every battle deserves your energy, and not every feeling deserves your response. By refusing to attend every emotional invitation, you begin to reclaim your time and mental space. Your mind becomes less crowded. You are no longer replaying conversations, imagining comebacks, or justifying your reactions. This mental freedom allows you to focus on what truly matters: your growth, your awareness, and your inner balance. The Buddha taught that peace is not found by controlling the world, but by understanding the mind. This practice also strengthens your boundaries. When people realize that they cannot easily provoke you, manipulate you, or draw you into unnecessary conflict, their influence weakens. Some may accuse you of being distant or cold. Buddhism teaches that misunderstanding is often the price of peace. You do not need to explain your calm to those who benefit from your reaction. Your silence becomes your answer. Over time, this discipline transforms you. Situations that once triggered you lose their power. Words that once hurt feel lighter. You begin to see emotional invitations as choices rather than obligations. This shift brings deep self-respect. You are no longer living reactively. You are living intentionally. Buddhism does not teach avoidance, but it teaches wise engagement. There are moments when speaking is necessary and moments when silence is healing. Knowing the difference is wisdom. When you stop attending every emotional invitation, you stop scattering your energy. You become centered, grounded, and unbothered. In this state, peace is no longer something you search for after conflict. It is something you preserve by choosing not to enter conflict unnecessarily. This is emotional maturity. This is inner strength. And this is the quiet power of a mind trained to observe, not react. 6. Your growth does not require an announcement. Buddhism teaches that the most meaningful transformations happen quietly, away from noise, validation, and external applause. Growth that needs to be announced often comes from the ego, while growth that is real usually moves in silence. When you feel the urge to explain how much you have changed, how healed you are, how disciplined you have become, or how different your life is now, it is often a sign that part of you is still seeking recognition. The Buddha's path reminds us that true progress does not require witnesses. It requires consistency, awareness, and patience. When growth is announced too early, it becomes fragile. People comment, question, doubt, compare, envy, or misunderstand. Their reactions begin to influence your direction. Some discourage you openly. Others do it subtly, through sarcasm, doubt, or false concern. Buddhism teaches discernment for this reason. Not everyone deserves access to your inner work. Not everyone is capable of holding your growth without projecting their own fears onto it. Silence protects what is still becoming. Think of growth like a seed planted in the soil. If you dig it up every day to show others that something is happening, it will never take root. It needs darkness, stillness, and time. Your habits, your discipline, your healing, your mindset, and your spiritual development need space to grow without interference. When you stay silent, you allow your transformation to deepen naturally, without pressure to perform or prove. The Buddha never advertised his awakening. His presence spoke for itself. Buddhism teaches that when something is real, it does not need explanation. When you change internally, people will feel it without you saying a word. Your calmness, your restraint, your boundaries, and your energy will communicate more than any announcement ever could. Silence allows your growth to integrate fully into who you are. Instead of becoming a temporary identity, you feel compelled to defend. Announcing growth can also trap you in comparison. You start measuring your progress against others or against the version of yourself you presented publicly. This creates anxiety and self-judgment. Buddhism teaches that the path is personal and non-linear. Some days you are steady, some days you struggle. When your growth is private, you give yourself permission to move at your own pace without external pressure. You grow for yourself, not for applause. There is also deep self-respect in quiet discipline. Waking up early, choosing silence over reaction, setting boundaries, practicing mindfulness, letting go of old patterns, these acts shape your life even if no one notices. Buddhism honors effort, not attention. The mind becomes stronger not when it is praised, but when it is trained consistently. When you stop seeking recognition, your focus sharpens. Your energy stays with you, instead of being scattered outward. Some people will only notice your growth when it inconveniences them, when you stop over-explaining, when you stop tolerating disrespect, when you stop reacting emotionally, when you stop being available in the ways you once were. At that point, they may question you, label you, or resist your change. Buddhism teaches acceptance here. You do not need to justify your evolution. Growth does not require permission. Silence also helps you stay humble. When you keep your progress internal, you remain a student of life rather than a performer of improvement. You stay open to learning, correcting yourself, and deepening awareness. Pride closes the mind. Quiet growth keeps it open. The Buddha emphasized humility because it keeps the path clear of ego-driven detours. As you move forward, remember this. Not everyone needs to know who you are becoming. Some people only knew the version of you that was accessible, reactive, and available. You are allowed to outgrow that version without explanation. Buddhism teaches that change is natural, and clinging to old identities, yours or others, creates suffering. When your growth remains unannounced, it becomes stable. It settles into your posture, your choices, your silence, and your presence. You no longer need to tell people you are different. They will feel it. And those who do not notice were never meant to walk beside the person you are becoming. This is quiet strength. This is self-mastery. This is growth rooted in wisdom rather than validation. 7. Detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. One of the most misunderstood teachings in Buddhism is detachment. Many people hear the word and immediately think it means becoming emotionally distant, uncaring, or disconnected from others. This misunderstanding causes fear because no one wants to lose their humanity or compassion. But Buddhism teaches something far deeper and more humane. Detachment is not the absence of feeling. It is the absence of bondage. It is not about shutting your heart down. It is about freeing your heart from unnecessary suffering. Suffering often begins when we cling too tightly to people, outcomes, expectations, and emotional narratives. We attach our peace to how others treat us, how situations unfold, or how life is supposed to look. When things go our way, we feel calm. When they don't, we collapse internally. Buddhism points out that this instability is not caused by love or care itself, but by attachment to control and permanence in a world that is constantly changing. Detachment is the wisdom that accepts change without resisting it. To be detached does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop losing yourself in what you care about. You can love deeply without demanding that love behave in a certain way. You can show kindness without expecting appreciation. You can support someone without carrying their pain as your own. Detachment allows you to stay present without becoming entangled. It creates emotional balance, where compassion flows without drowning the mind. When you lack detachment, every interaction becomes heavy. You overthink messages, tones, reactions, and silences. You replay conversations. You imagine worst-case scenarios. You take things personally that were never about you. Buddhism teaches that this mental noise is a form of suffering created by attachment to meaning that may not even exist. Detachment clears this noise. It allows you to see situations as they are, not as your fears interpret them. Detachment also brings clarity in relationships. When you are attached, you tolerate what harms you out of fear of loss. You overgive, over-explain, and overstay. You ignore your inner signals because you are afraid of being alone or misunderstood. Buddhism teaches that clarity comes when you observe without clinging. You begin to see people clearly without idealization or resentment. You recognize patterns instead of making excuses. This clarity is not cruel, it is honest. There is deep self-respect in detachment. When you are detached, you do not beg for attention, chase validation, or compete for emotional security. You understand that your worth is not something others grant or take away. You stop trying to control how people feel about you. You allow them to be as they are, while you choose how close they get to your inner world. This is not emotional distance. It is emotional intelligence. Detachment also protects you from emotional exhaustion. When you are overly attached, you carry more than your share of emotional weight. You feel responsible for fixing people, saving situations, and keeping everyone happy. Buddhism teaches that this is a subtle form of ego, the belief that you are responsible for outcomes beyond your control. Detachment humbles the mind. It reminds you that everyone walks their own path, faces their own karma, and learns their own lessons. With detachment, you stop resisting reality, you stop fighting change, you stop demanding certainty in an uncertain world. This acceptance brings peace. Not because life becomes perfect, but because your mind stops arguing with what is. Detachment allows joy without fear of loss and sadness without collapse. Emotions still arise, but they pass through you instead of defining you. Many people fear that detachment will make them lonely. In reality, it does the opposite. It improves the quality of connection. When you are detached, you are not using others to fill emotional voids. You are present because you choose to be, not because you need to be. This creates healthier relationships rooted in mutual respect rather than dependency. You give freely without expectation. And when something ends, you grieve without being destroyed. Buddhism teaches that clarity is kindness to yourself. Detachment gives you that clarity. It allows you to step back, breathe, and respond wisely instead of reacting emotionally. You stop confusing intensity with love and attachment with loyalty. You begin to understand that true peace comes from within, not from controlling external conditions. As detachment deepens, you notice a quiet strength emerging. Situations that once shook, you feel lighter. Words that once hurt lose their sharpness. You still care, but you are no longer trapped by caring. This balance is the heart of Buddhist wisdom. You remain open, compassionate, and human, while also grounded, stable, and free. Detachment is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming clear. Clear enough to love without suffering. Clear enough to engage without losing yourself. Clear enough to walk through life unbothered, not because you feel nothing, but because you understand everything passes. And in that understanding, peace naturally follows. Wait, observe more, react less. Buddhism teaches that the difference between suffering and peace is often not found in what happens to us, but in how quickly we react to it. The untrained mind reacts instantly. It defends, attacks, assumes, judges, and emotionally responds before understanding what is actually happening. This instant reaction feels natural, but it is also the root of much regret, confusion, and inner chaos. The Buddha taught observation as a path to freedom, because when you observe first, you create space. And in that space, wisdom appears. Observation means allowing a moment to exist without immediately labeling it as good or bad, right or wrong, personal or intentional. When someone speaks harshly, ignores you, or behaves in a way that triggers discomfort, the reactive mind instantly builds a story. It assumes disrespect. It assumes rejection. It assumes threat. Buddhism teaches that these stories are often illusions created by past wounds, fears, and conditioning. When you observe instead of react, you begin to see that not everything is about you, and not everything requires your emotional involvement. Reacting gives your power away. The moment you react emotionally, you allow external events to control your inner state. A single comment can shift your mood. A misunderstanding can consume your thoughts. A small conflict can steal hours of peace. Buddhism teaches that this is not strength. It is enslavement. Observation returns power to you. When you observe, you remain centered. You watch thoughts arise without obeying them. You feel emotions without becoming them. You allow situations to reveal themselves fully before choosing how or if you will respond. The Buddha emphasized mindfulness because it trains the mind to pause. This pause is not empty, it is full of awareness. In that pause, you notice your breath, your body, and your inner reaction forming. You notice tension in the chest, heat in the face, or thoughts racing to justify or defend. Simply noticing these sensations weakens their control. When you observe them without judgment, they begin to dissolve on their own. This is how inner mastery is built, not through force, but through awareness. Observation also allows you to see people clearly. When you react quickly, you often respond to your interpretation, not to reality. You project intention where there may be none. You assume meaning where there may only be habit, ignorance, or pain. Buddhism teaches compassion through understanding. When you observe, you start to recognize that many people are acting from their own suffering. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it frees you from taking it personally. You respond with clarity rather than wounded emotion. Reacting less does not mean suppressing emotions. Buddhism does not teach emotional denial. It teaches emotional intelligence. Suppression traps emotion inside the body, creating tension and imbalance. Observation allows emotion to move through you naturally. You feel anger without acting on it. You feel sadness without collapsing into it. You feel fear without letting it control your decisions. This is a powerful form of self-respect. You honor your emotions without letting them rule you. When you observe more, your words change. You speak less impulsively. You choose silence more often. You no longer feel the need to respond immediately to messages, comments, or provocations. You understand that urgency is often an illusion created by emotion. Buddhism teaches that wise speech arises from calm awareness, not from emotional pressure. Sometimes the best response comes later. Sometimes it never comes at all, and often silence itself is the most accurate response. Observation also reveals patterns both in others and in yourself. You begin to see what consistently triggers you, where your expectations lie, and which attachments cause discomfort. This self-awareness is transformative. Instead of blaming situations or people, you understand your own mind more deeply. The Buddha taught that insight into the self is the path to liberation. When you see clearly, you suffer less. As you practice observing more and reacting less, your nervous system begins to calm. Life feels slower, not because events change, but because your inner pace does. You stop rushing emotionally. You stop being pulled in multiple directions by every stimulus. This creates inner stability. You become someone who can sit with discomfort without needing to escape it immediately. This capacity is rare and powerful. People may notice this change in you. They may say you are quieter, calmer, or harder to provoke. Some may feel unsettled by your lack of reaction because they are used to controlling others through emotional triggers. Buddhism teaches that this discomfort is not your responsibility. Your job is not to react on demand. Your job is to live with awareness and integrity. Over time, observation becomes natural. You no longer have to force it. The mind learns that it is safe to pause. It learns that not every thought needs to be followed, and not every feeling needs to be acted upon. This is mental freedom. You are no longer at war with your inner world. You are no longer fighting reality. You are present. The Buddha taught that enlightenment is not about becoming someone else. It is about seeing clearly. When you observe more and react less, clarity replaces confusion. Peace replaces agitation. Choice replaces compulsion. You are no longer living at the mercy of impulses. You are living from awareness. This is how you become unbothered, not by becoming numb, but by becoming conscious. You still feel, still care, still engage with life, but you do so from a place of balance. Life continues to move. People continue to behave unpredictably, and situations continue to change. The difference is that you remain steady within it all. Observe more, react less. In this simple shift lies deep freedom, lasting peace, and true self-mastery, the kind Buddhism has pointed to for centuries. 9. Let go of the role of the rescuer. One of the most exhausting roles a person can unconsciously adopt is the role of the rescuer. Buddhism teaches that much suffering is created not only by pain itself, but by the belief that it is our responsibility to fix, save, or heal others at the expense of ourselves. The rescuer believes that love means carrying other people's burdens, absorbing their emotions, solving their problems, and staying even when it hurts. At first, this role feels meaningful. It gives a sense of purpose, importance, and connection. But over time, it quietly drains the mind, the body, and the spirit. The Buddha taught that each person walks their own path shaped by karma, awareness, and choice. When you try to rescue others from lessons they are meant to learn themselves, you interfere with the natural process of growth. You may believe you are helping, but often you are prolonging suffering, both theirs and yours. People cannot be saved against their will, and they cannot heal at a pace that is not their own. This truth is difficult to accept, especially for those who are compassionate, empathetic, or emotionally sensitive. But Buddhism reminds us that compassion without wisdom becomes self-destruction. The rescuer often feels responsible for other people's emotions. If someone is sad, you feel it is your job to make them happy. If someone is struggling, you feel guilty for resting. If someone is angry, you believe you must calm them. Over time, this creates a life where your inner state is always tied to someone else's condition. You stop listening to your own needs. You silence your own pain. You postpone your own healing. Buddhism teaches that neglecting yourself is not selflessness, it is imbalance. This role is often learned early in life. Many rescuers grew up in environments where they had to be emotionally strong, supportive, or mature too soon. They learned that love meant fixing, that worth came from being needed, and that rest was earned only after everyone else was okay. Buddhism invites you to gently question these beliefs. Were they ever truly fair to you? Did carrying everyone else actually bring peace, or did it create quiet resentment, burnout, and emptiness? Letting go of the rescuer role does not mean becoming uncaring or selfish. Buddhism does not teach indifference. It teaches right relationship. Right relationship begins with understanding where your responsibility ends. You can offer kindness without obligation. You can listen without solving. You can support without sacrificing yourself. You can love without losing your center. This balance is not cruelty, it is clarity. When you stop rescuing, you may feel discomfort at first. Guilt may arise. Anxiety may whisper that you are abandoning others or becoming cold. Buddhism teaches that these feelings are echoes of old conditioning, not signs of wrongdoing. The mind resists change, especially when identity is involved. If you have built your sense of worth around being the helper, stepping back can feel like losing yourself. But what you are actually losing is a role that was costing you your peace. The rescuer often attracts people who avoid responsibility for their own growth. When you always fix, others never have to face themselves. They rely on your strength instead of building their own. This creates dependency, imbalance, and often resentment on both sides. Buddhism teaches that true compassion empowers others rather than weakening them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and allow someone to experience the consequences, discomfort, or lessons they need to evolve. Letting go of this role also means accepting that you cannot protect everyone from pain. Pain is part of life. Struggle is part of awakening. The Buddha did not remove suffering from the world. He taught a path through it. When you accept this, you stop fighting reality. You stop exhausting yourself trying to create a pain-free environment for others. Instead, you focus on being present, grounded, and wise in your own life. This shift creates space for self-respect. You begin to honor your energy, your limits, and your inner signals. You stop saying yes when your body says no. You stop staying when your spirit feels depleted. You stop confusing endurance with love. Buddhism teaches that a calm, centered mind is more valuable than constant availability. When you protect your inner balance, you are better able to offer genuine kindness when it is truly needed. As you release the rescuer role, relationships change. Some people may pull away when they realize you will no longer carry them. Some may try to guilt you back into old patterns. Some may accuse you of changing. Buddhism teaches non-attachment here. Not every relationship is meant to continue once growth begins. Those who truly care will adapt. Those who only benefited from your self-neglect may resist. This is not a failure, it is clarity. Letting go of rescuing also frees you from emotional exhaustion. Your mind becomes quieter. Your body feels lighter. You no longer wake up carrying problems that are not yours. You begin to invest energy in your own healing, awareness, and growth. Buddhism teaches that you cannot pour from an empty vessel, but more importantly, you are not required to pour endlessly. You are allowed to be whole, rested, and centered. True compassion includes yourself. The Buddha emphasized the middle way, neither self-indulgence nor self-denial. Letting go of the rescuer role is an act of balance. You move from compulsion to choice, from obligation to intention, from emotional overextension to grounded presence. In this state, you help when it is appropriate, not when it is demanded. You care without collapsing. You love without disappearing. You become a steady presence rather than an exhausted one. This is not abandonment. This is wisdom. When you finally step out of the rescuer role, you reclaim your life. You stop living in reaction to other people's pain. You stop defining yourself by usefulness alone. You begin to experience peace that is not dependent on fixing anything. Buddhism teaches that liberation begins when you release what you were never meant to carry. Let others walk their path. Let yourself walk yours. In this letting go, you do not lose compassion, you deepen it. And in that depth, you find freedom, clarity, and a self-respect that no longer leaks away through endless saving of others. 10. Do not chase closure, create acceptance. One of the quiet causes of long-lasting emotional pain is the belief that peace will come only after closure. Closure is often imagined as a final conversation, an apology, an explanation, a confession, or a moment where everything finally makes sense. The mind tells itself that once the other person understands, admits, or clarifies, then the heart will rest. Buddhism gently reveals a hard truth. Closure that depends on others keeps you trapped. Acceptance, which comes from within, sets you free. When you chase closure, you give power to what you cannot control. You wait for someone to respond differently, to take responsibility, to say the words you needed but never received. Your mind keeps returning to the past, replaying conversations, imagining alternative endings, and hoping for a resolution that may never arrive. Buddhism teaches that this is a form of attachment, not just attachment to people, but attachment to a specific version of reality that no longer exists. This attachment keeps suffering alive. The Buddha taught that suffering continues when we resist what is. When something ends without explanation, the mind rebels. It demands fairness, clarity, and emotional justice. But life does not always provide these things. People leave without explaining. They hurt without apologizing. They change without warning. When you insist that peace can only come after closure, you remain emotionally dependent on someone else's awareness, honesty, or maturity. This dependence quietly steals your peace. Acceptance is different. Acceptance does not mean approval. It does not mean what happened was right, fair, or justified. Acceptance means recognizing reality as it is, not as you wish it had been. It is the moment you stop asking, "Why did this happen?" and start acknowledging, "This happened, and I am still here." Buddhism teaches that acceptance is not passive surrender, it is active wisdom. It is the decision to stop fighting reality in your mind. When you create acceptance, you take your power back. You no longer wait for permission to heal. You no longer need someone else's words to validate your pain. You stop giving the past authority over your present. The Buddha taught that the mind creates suffering by clinging to unresolved stories. Acceptance loosens this grip. It allows the story to fade without needing a final chapter written by someone else. Many people fear acceptance because they believe it means forgetting, minimizing, or betraying their own pain. Buddhism teaches the opposite. Acceptance honors your experience without letting it define you. You acknowledge what hurt you, what changed you, and what you lost without living inside it forever. You allow grief without attachment. You allow memory without obsession. This balance is where healing lives. Chasing closure often keeps emotional wounds open. Each unanswered question becomes a hook that pulls your mind back into the past. Each hope for explanation delays your growth. Buddhism teaches impermanence. Everything changes, including people, emotions, and relationships. When you accept that not everything ends neatly, you stop demanding permanence from what was never meant to last. Acceptance also brings humility. You recognize that you may never fully understand another person's actions, and that understanding is not required for peace. You stop trying to solve emotional puzzles that were never yours to solve. You let go of the belief that clarity must come from outside. Instead, clarity arises from within, through insight and awareness. When you stop chasing closure, your mind becomes quieter. You no longer rehearse imaginary conversations. You no longer wait for messages that never arrive. You no longer feel tied to someone's silence. Buddhism teaches that peace comes when the mind rests in the present moment, not when it revisits unresolved pasts. Acceptance anchors you in now. This shift also restores self-respect. When you chase closure, you often revisit situations where you were hurt, dismissed, or undervalued. You reopen wounds in the hope of healing them. Acceptance says, "I do not need to return to pain to prove it mattered." You honor yourself by moving forward, not by reliving what broke you. Acceptance allows forgiveness to arise naturally, without force. Forgiveness in Buddhism is not about excusing harm. It is about releasing yourself from the burden of resentment. When you accept what happened, you stop feeding anger with repetition. You stop giving emotional energy to someone who may no longer be part of your life. This release is not weakness, it is liberation. As acceptance deepens, you notice something subtle but powerful. Your identity begins to detach from the wound. You are no longer the one who was abandoned, the one who was misunderstood, or the one who never got answers. You are simply you, present, aware, and moving forward. Buddhism teaches that clinging to identity creates suffering. Acceptance loosens identity's grip. Creating acceptance also prepares you for the future. When you no longer need perfect endings, you become resilient. You understand that life is uncertain, people are imperfect, and clarity does not always arrive on time. This understanding does not make you cynical, it makes you grounded. You stop demanding guarantees from life and start living with awareness. Acceptance is an inner decision. No one can give it to you, and no one can take it away. The Buddha taught that liberation begins when the mind stops chasing what cannot be controlled. Closure seeks peace through others. Acceptance creates peace through understanding. When you accept, you do not erase the past. You release its control. You do not deny pain, you allow it to pass. You do not forget, you let go. And in that letting go, something new becomes possible. Space opens. The heart softens. The mind rests. Do not chase closure from people who cannot give it. Do not wait for words that may never come. Create acceptance within yourself. This is not resignation. This is wisdom. This is how Buddhism teaches the mind to stop suffering, not by fixing the past, but by freeing the present. 11. Your peace is more important than being right. One of the most subtle traps of the mind is the belief that being right will bring peace. We tell ourselves that if we explain clearly enough, argue skillfully enough, or defend our position strongly enough, then others will finally understand, and the inner tension will dissolve. Buddhism teaches that this belief is an illusion. Being right may satisfy the ego for a moment, but it rarely brings lasting peace. In fact, the need to be right often becomes a direct cause of suffering. The Buddha taught that clinging to views is one of the roots of conflict. When you attach your identity to opinions, beliefs, or perspectives, any disagreement feels like a personal threat. Conversations turn into battles, discussions turn into emotional exchanges. Even small differences become sources of irritation. The mind becomes restless, always preparing its next defense. This constant tension is not strength, it is a form of bondage. When you prioritize being right, you unknowingly hand your peace over to other people's understanding. Your calm becomes dependent on whether they agree, accept, or admit fault. If they do not, frustration grows, anger follows, resentment settles in. Buddhism teaches that peace built on agreement is unstable because agreement is never guaranteed. People see the world through their own conditioning, experiences, and limitations. Expecting them to see things exactly as you do is an invitation to suffering. Letting go of the need to be right does not mean you abandon truth or values. It means you stop sacrificing inner harmony to defend them unnecessarily. Buddhism teaches wise speaking when it is beneficial, timely, and compassionate. Not every truth needs to be spoken. Not every misunderstanding needs correction. Not every disagreement needs resolution. Sometimes silence preserves peace better than explanation ever could. The ego often confuses silence with defeat. It tells you that if you do not correct someone, they will think they are right, and you are wrong. Buddhism asks a deeper question: why does that matter so much? What is being protected when you argue? Often, it is not truth, but identity. The need to be right is closely tied to the need to be validated. When you let go of this need, your sense of self becomes less fragile. You stop measuring your worth through intellectual or moral superiority. Being right can cost you relationships, energy, and emotional stability. How many times have arguments continued long after they stopped being productive? How often has the mind replayed conversations, searching for better words or stronger points? Buddhism teaches that this mental repetition is a form of suffering. The mind becomes trapped in conflict even when the situation has ended. Peace, on the other hand, allows the mind to rest. Choosing peace does not mean you agree with everything. It means you accept that disagreement is part of life. You can hold your perspective quietly without forcing it on others. You can walk away from arguments that drain you. You can let others be wrong in your eyes without needing to correct them. This restraint is not weakness, it is wisdom. When your peace becomes more important than being right, something changes in how you communicate. You listen more, you speak less, You respond with calm rather than urgency. You notice when a conversation is no longer about understanding, but about winning. At that moment, Buddhism teaches withdrawal, not physical withdrawal necessarily, but emotional disengagement. You stop adding fuel to the fire. This shift also changes your inner world. You no longer carry the burden of unfinished arguments. You no longer feel responsible for changing people's minds. You stop taking disagreements as personal failure. The mind feels lighter, less guarded, more open. Buddhism teaches that spaciousness is a sign of inner freedom. There is also kindness in choosing peace. When you no longer need to be right, you become more willing to understand others. You realize that everyone is shaped by different experiences and pain. You stop seeing disagreement as conflict and start seeing it as difference. This understanding softens the heart. The Buddha taught the middle way, not extremes of self-indulgence or self-denial. Here, the middle way means holding truth without aggression and peace without avoidance. You speak when it helps. You stay silent when it harms. You let go when clinging creates suffering. As this practice deepens, you see that peace is an inner state, not a prize for winning arguments. It does not come after others admit they were wrong. It comes when you stop demanding that the world match your views. This realization is freeing. You no longer feel the need to correct every misunderstanding. You trust your own understanding without needing outside approval. Choosing peace over being right is an act of self-respect. It is you saying your inner calm matters more than ego comfort. It is you choosing clarity over conflict, stability over validation. Buddhism teaches that freedom comes when the mind stops fighting unnecessary battles. When you release the need to be right, life becomes quieter. Conversations become softer. Your inner voice becomes gentler. You stop arguing with people, with situations, and with yourself. In that quiet, peace naturally grows, not because everyone agrees with you, but because you no longer need them to. This is not giving up truth. This is choosing wisdom. This is how Buddhism teaches the mind to stay unbothered, not by silencing others, but by calming itself. 12. Become so grounded that nothing shakes you. Buddhism teaches that the highest strength is inner steadiness. Not the kind of strength that controls others, but the kind that stays calm when life becomes loud, uncertain, or unfair. To become grounded is to build a center so stable that outside events no longer control your emotions. Life will still change. People will disappoint, situations will shift, and plans will break apart. Being grounded does not stop these things. It stops them from stealing your peace. Most people live ungrounded lives. Their emotions rise and fall with circumstances. Praise lifts them up. Criticism pulls them down. Silence from others creates worry. Chaos in the world creates chaos inside. Buddhism teaches that this instability comes from living on the surface of life, instead of living from within. When your sense of self depends on results, approval, or certainty, you stay vulnerable. To be grounded is to move your identity inward, away from what changes, and toward what stays. Groundedness begins with awareness. You start noticing how often your mind looks outside for safety, comfort, or meaning. You notice how quickly emotions rise when something unexpected happens. Instead of judging it, Buddhism teaches gentle watching. Each time you notice your mind being pulled outward, you bring it back inward, back to your breath, back to now, back to the body. Over time, this practice becomes an inner anchor. The Buddha taught that impermanence is the nature of everything. Everything changes, whether we want it to or not. When you fight this truth, you suffer. When you accept it, you become stronger. Grounded people do not expect life to stay the same. They expect change. Because of this, they are less surprised when things fall apart. They adjust instead of panic. They grieve without breaking. They move forward without bitterness. Being grounded does not mean becoming emotionally numb. It means becoming emotionally steady. You still feel sadness, anger, joy, and disappointment, but these emotions no longer control you. They move through you like weather moving through the sky. Buddhism teaches that emotions are passing visitors, not permanent owners. When you are grounded, you let emotions rise without letting them uproot your peace. One important part of groundedness is self-trust. When you trust yourself, you are less shaken by other people's opinions. You no longer need constant reassurance. You do not fall apart when someone disagrees with you. You understand that others see life through their own conditioning. Buddhism teaches that clinging to other people's views creates suffering. Rootedness releases you from this dependence. You know who you are, even when others don't. Rootedness also grows through discipline. Simple daily practices, silence, mindfulness, reflection, and restraint build strength in the mind over time. Buddhism does not promise instant change. It teaches slow and steady growth. Each time you choose calm over reaction, awareness over impulse, and clarity over drama, your roots become deeper. You may not see it right away, but one day you realize that what once shook you now passes quietly. A rooted person does not rush emotionally. They do not feel forced to respond straight away. They are at ease with pauses, silence, and uncertainty. Buddhism teaches that urgency often comes from fear. When you are rooted, you are no longer controlled by fear. You trust that clarity will come with time. You let life unfold without forcing outcomes. Rootedness also means having boundaries that don't need constant defense. You don't over-explain yourself. You don't justify your calm. You don't fight for your peace. You understand that not everyone needs access to you. Buddhism teaches right effort, using your energy wisely. Rooted people protect their energy. They put it into what feeds their inner world, instead of spreading it across conflict and distraction. When you are deeply rooted, you stop taking everything personally. You see that much human behavior is driven by pain, fear, and conditioning. This understanding creates compassion without self-sacrifice. You care, but you don't absorb. You listen, but you don't carry. You help, but you don't lose yourself. Buddhism teaches that this balance is the middle way. Rootedness also prepares you for solitude. When you are not rooted, being alone feels empty or scary. When you are rooted, solitude feels healing. You feel comfortable with your own presence. You don't need constant stimulation or validation. Buddhism teaches that peace is found within, not through non-stop engagement. Rooted people feel safe in silence because they are not running from themselves. As your roots deepen, you start to feel a quiet confidence, not arrogance, not superiority, just steadiness. You move through life without needing to prove anything. You become less reactive, less defensive, and less anxious. People may notice and say you seem calmer, stronger, or different. Buddhism teaches that real change is felt more than it is explained. Nothing truly shakes a rooted person because their foundation is not built on what can be taken away. It is built on awareness, acceptance, and inner clarity. Loss still hurts, but it doesn't destroy you. Failure still stings, but it doesn't define you. Uncertainty still exists, but it doesn't freeze you. Rootedness helps you face life as it is, not as you want it to be. The Buddha taught that freedom comes from understanding the mind. When the mind is steady, the world loses its power to disturb you. Becoming rooted is not a destination, it is a way of living, a daily return to presence, a constant choice to stay grounded instead of scattered. As you move forward, remember this: the world will always try to shake you through noise, comparison, fear, and distraction. But when you are deeply rooted within yourself, nothing outside can uproot your peace. You stand steady not because life is calm, but because you are. This is the final mastery. not control over circumstances, but stability inside them, not escape from life, but strength within it. Buddhism calls this freedom, and it begins the moment you stop searching outward for grounding and start building it within. 13. Walk alone without feeling lonely. One of the deepest fears the human mind carries is the fear of being alone. Buddhism teaches that this fear is not really about physical solitude, but about inner emptiness. Many people stay surrounded by noise, relationships, conversations, and constant interaction, not because they love it, but because silence brings up parts of themselves they haven't learned to sit with. To walk alone without feeling lonely is not isolation, it is inner wholeness. Loneliness is not the absence of people, it is the absence of connection with yourself. You can be surrounded by others and still feel deeply lonely. You can be alone and feel truly at peace. Buddhism teaches that suffering begins when we search for completion outside ourselves. When we believe someone else must be there for us to feel whole, calm, or safe, we give away our inner stability. Walking alone feels painful only when we have not made peace with our own mind. Learning to walk alone begins with learning to be present with yourself. Silence can feel uncomfortable at first. Without distractions, thoughts rise, old memories return, fears appear, and regrets whisper. Buddhism does not teach running from these experiences. It teaches facing them with awareness. When you sit with yourself long enough, without judgment, the noise starts to fade. You realize that much of what you feared was not dangerous, just unfamiliar. Walking alone is often a sign of growth. As you mature emotionally and spiritually, your priorities begin to change. You no longer connect with certain conversations, environments, or relationships. This does not mean you are better than others, it simply means you are evolving. Buddhism teaches impermanence. Everything changes, including who you align with. When growth happens, solitude often follows, not as punishment, but as preparation. Many people leave their inner path because solitude feels uneasy. They return to familiar chaos instead of facing unfamiliar peace. Buddhism teaches that this is how suffering repeats. Walking alone takes courage. It means trusting that you are enough company for yourself. It means knowing your worth does not depend on constant interaction or validation. When you walk alone with awareness, loneliness slowly turns into spaciousness. You begin to notice the depth of your inner world. You listen more fully. You see life more clearly. You move at your own pace. You stop rushing to fill the silence. Buddhism teaches that silence is not empty, it is full of clarity. In that silence, you reconnect with intuition, wisdom, and inner guidance. Walking alone also teaches discernment. You become careful about who you keep close, not because you shut people out, but because you are rooted. You no longer fear losing those who don't match your values. You understand that forcing connection creates suffering. Buddhism teaches right relationship, connection that is balanced, respectful, and free from dependence. Walking alone helps you see what kind of connection is healthy. There is also deep self-respect in solitude. When you are comfortable alone, you stop accepting disrespect just to avoid loneliness. You don't stay where you are unseen. You don't trade your peace for company. Buddhism teaches that attachment to companionship can be as binding as attachment to possessions. Releasing this attachment brings freedom. Walking alone does not mean you reject love or friendship. It means you no longer use them to escape yourself. When relationships come from wholeness instead of need, they feel lighter, healthier, and more real. Buddhism teaches that true connection happens when two whole people meet, not when two people cling out of fear. As you walk alone, you may feel moments of sadness. Buddhism does not deny this. Sadness is a natural part of being human. But sadness does not mean you are failing. It means you are alive. The difference is that sadness no longer defines you. It moves through you, like everything else. You don't run from it. You don't build a story around it. You let it come and go. Walking alone also strengthens inner trust. You stop seeking constant reassurance. You depend on your own judgment. You learn from your own mistakes. Buddhism teaches that self-trust grows through presence, not perfection. Each time you choose awareness over avoidance, your confidence grows quietly. Over time, solitude becomes familiar. Peace replaces restlessness. You realize that being alone does not mean being abandoned. It means being aligned. You feel connected to life itself, not only to people. Buddhism teaches interconnectedness, not dependence, but belonging. You belong to life, whether someone is beside you or not. Walking alone without feeling lonely is one of the final stages of inner maturity. You no longer fear empty space. You no longer rush to fill silence. You move through life grounded, steady, and complete. People may come and go, but you stay present with yourself. This does not make you distant, it makes you free. When you can walk alone in peace, you are no longer controlled by fear of loss. You choose connection instead of clinging. You offer presence instead of need. You love without dependence. Buddhism teaches that this is true freedom, being alone without suffering and together without attachment. In this state, life feels lighter. You are not chasing, you are not escaping. You are simply walking aware, rooted, and whole. As you reach the end of these lessons, understand this clearly. Focusing on yourself, staying silent, and letting go of others is not about becoming cold, distant, or cut off from life. It is about becoming centered. Buddhism never taught escape from the world. It taught freedom within it, freedom from constant reaction, freedom from emotional exhaustion, freedom from living at the mercy of other people's moods, opinions, and expectations. When you stop explaining yourself, you protect your energy. When you correct yourself instead of others, you take your power back. When silence becomes your shield, peace becomes your natural state. When you let go of the need to be liked, you stop hiding your truth. When you decline every emotional invitation, you choose clarity over chaos. When you grow quietly, your strength becomes real. When detachment brings clarity, not coldness, you love without losing yourself. When you observe more and react less, wisdom replaces impulse. When you release the rescuer role, you finally find rest. When you stop chasing closure and choose acceptance, the past starts to loosen its grip. When you choose peace over being right, your mind becomes lighter. When you become deeply rooted, nothing can shake you. And when you learn to walk alone without feeling lonely, you realize you were never truly incomplete. This is the path of self-respect. This is the path of inner mastery. This is the quiet revolution Buddhism offers in a noisy world. As 2026 unfolds, the world will not suddenly become calmer. People will not instantly become kinder, wiser, or more aware. But you can, and that is enough. When you are unbothered, life loses its power to disturb you. You still feel, still care, still live fully, but from a place of balance, awareness, and strength. Remember this, the loudest life is not the strongest one, the calmest mind is. Walk forward quietly, look inward, stay rooted, let go without bitterness, and let your peace become your greatest achievement.